should so-called subversive groups be tracked? It may come as a surprise, but the technology is already in operation.
If you go through Terminal 3 at Toronto International Airport, the United States Department of Immigration has a biometric scanner which you can use if you sign up for the program. It's called INSPASS. And in order to sign up for this program, you give the US Department of Immigration a handprint, and you pass through this system, put your hand on a reader which reads your handprint after having read the information that's encoded on your card. You punch in your flight number on a little terminal, and the gate goes open and you walk through without having to talk to a customs or an immigration officer.
I certainly feel that someday we will all be identified by our biometric, both for use at an ATM machine. We will walk up and put our finger pattern or hand geometry or our eye scan in front of that machine, and we'll be accepted right into the system and welcomed, and we'll be able to transact our business. I believe biometric will be used in every part of our life someday. I believe it will be used to unlock the door to your house, to start your car, to transmit transactions or get on your computer. Everything you do will require that you prove who you are.
The principle of being able to identify people is a reasonable one, and in many cases we want to be able to identify people. We want to make sure that you're using your credit card. We want to make sure that your health data is being associated with your previous medical record, so that the principle of identifying people is perfectly reasonable. The question is, as with everything else, how are we going to place limits on this so that it's not used in other ways that we don't think are appropriate?
Technology has always worn two faces, and it is the timeless problem of society to ensure that technology serves humanity and not have humanity serving technology. The latter equation is the Orwellian life. We're getting closer to it all the time. We've got to stop.
We see a tremendous pressure to develop technical solutions to certain kinds of problems, whether it is policing or marketing or revenue checking through Revenue Canada. So the pressure in both directions comes in a way that encourages technical means of identifying, classifying people, that is to say grading people according to certain criteria, and sorting them within these classification systems and trying to predict their behaviors.
Initially, I guess, police, security services, and so on that protect our countries would use these mechanisms to trace down criminals and those who are perhaps taking terrorist-type activity and so on. However, who's to stop that from bleeding over to the average citizen, taking advantage of what we classify our own privacy? It's all too easy to bleed over.
For example, you have a situation of policing. Increasingly, policing is done in a preemptive way, trying to work out who is likely to break the law, who is going to infringe some rule. And that preemptive, so-called techno-policing is on the rise. It's a good solution from the point of view of cost-benefit analysis. But what does it do? It means that time-honored features of our own legal system, which has a good ethical base, that you are innocent until you're proved guilty, is just turned on its head. If you're in a category of suspects, just because you happen to, your profile happens to fit the statistical likelihood of your being in that category, you are guilty until proved innocent.
You see, so often what happens, these things become something like the sorcerer's apprentice. We create the instrument. There's a legitimate reason for it, but the instrument goes on and becomes a monster in its own right.
I caused them trouble. I was defending people and getting them acquitted who they wanted in prison. They didn't like that, so they started to look at me, trying to find out about my personal background, who my father was, what our family was, where my money came from, whether I had a single or had girlfriends, that kind of thing. Personal information that they had absolutely no business gathering.
There are very big forces out there that, while they don't coerce us, certainly are trying to manipulate our choices, channel our desires, make us live in a particular kind of way, and it may not be the way that we would choose to live if the various kinds of alternatives were explained to us.
Today, as we move into this brave new world, which has that same synchronistic, pluralistic religious view of the ancient Romans, Christianity seems more and more out of step. Those who hate Christianity find they're able now in this brave new world that we're entering to attack Christianity, claiming that somehow our beliefs make us intolerant.
Jesus in John 15:25, they hated me without a cause. But during the tribulation hour under the New World Order and the world dictator, it's going to get worse. Anyone who even honors this Christ is going to be killed, Revelation 13:15, Revelation 20, verse 4.
I bet when they come up with all this new technology, they didn't tell anybody to use for this.
They sure did. In fact, it sounded so good that even a lot of Christians thought it sounded great.
I remember a few years ago they came in, they took our fingerprints, scanned my face, all that technical stuff, but I thought it was just for prisoners.
I'm afraid not, John. It's for everybody now.
They're keeping track of everyone. They sure must have a big filing cabinet out there somewhere.
Times have changed, my friend. Times have changed.
There are enormous quantities of highly sensitive and intimate personal information about all of us now contained in data banks all over the place. Governments alone have literally billions of pieces of information. If they start matching up all this data and using it any way they like, our rights and our privacy are in serious jeopardy. That is now happening and needs to be looked at very carefully.
30 years ago, people were screaming and yelling about a national database, a national data bank, and that there were proposals to create a single computer filled with personal information on all people in this country. Well, now that's a ridiculous concept. You can have distributed networks, distributed systems. You can have millions and millions and millions of computers. They all talk to each other. You can link information, you can share information, you can manipulate it, you can create profiles. It's absurd to talk about a data bank. The information is all over the world. It is in many, many different databases, and they can all talk to each other.
I don't think we'll ever see one mega computer storing all the information on everyone everywhere. It will be network that will allow access to information across the board, but there'll be many multiple computer systems and network systems all operating independently and yet can cross-border, can talk to each other to bring up files and communicate across the world.
If that's the case, then everything you say, do can be tracked and monitored, literally. And as the capability to store that information becomes more and more cheaper and able to be done, then everything that you do and say can be tracked.
It's the ease with which information can be moved, databases can be merged, and the ease and the difficulty in controlling who has access to that information that raises very serious concerns, and they're very legitimate concerns.
There's so much money at stake, and there's so much potential to profit from the system that I think we're fooling ourselves if we think that they haven't put a lot of careful thought into exactly how the system's designed. So I think when anonymity isn't a feature of the system, that's not an accident. That's a design goal.
We create a lot of these encroachments on privacy in order to, because they're administratively convenient, they save money, they help us plan, they help society with any one of a number of perfectly legitimate activities. But in the course of doing it, we create tremendous potential to invade people's privacy. With the press of a button, these computers these days can turn out information, coordinate reams and reams of information on people, where they go, what they do, where they with whom, and all of that.
You know, I mean, if people want to be stamped and identified and dehumanized or traced and matched in this fashion, then what kind of society do we have?
It's much like the bomb. You have it, it gets used. You you set up a concentration camp, it gets filled. So I think the technology, in a sense, creates the preconditions for its own use.
The thing that is really needed here is an aware, alert citizenry. I think if the public understood even a quarter of the informational exchanging that is going on without their knowledge and consent, they would be very, very concerned indeed.
Wow, beat me up, Scotty. Sounds more like Star Trek than the evening news. I guess this is all a shock to me, having been in here for so long. The world must have seen it coming, right?
I'm afraid not. Even though the technology had been around for years, nobody really paid too much attention to it. Computers that watch where you drive, satellites up in space that could track your every move. They've even been able to monitor our phone calls for years, but nobody really paid too much attention to it. Almost no one saw it coming.
Almost no one?
Yeah, almost. Those of us who did express our concern were just branded as paranoid, as people who hated technology, people who just weren't ready to be part of a new, united world. And the problem was that the very technology that we were concerned about was actually used to track us down. And believe me, there's no longer anywhere to hide.
It's very hard to hide anything right now because of the high technology. Technology is advancing so rapidly that many times we can't cope with it. Many times we don't understand it. We don't know how the systems work. But the technology provides the surveillance that governments want.
You might once have imagined that a car park would be watched by a physical attendant with a little peaked cap. Can you imagine a situation where many, many thousands of kilometers away, there is somebody in a quite different country, quite different continent, watching the car park where your car happens to be? Now, that's the kind of age that I think we're living in.
You know, you got the stars of the harvest moon going for you. You got nature going for you. You're all by yourself, or so you think. And you look up in the sky and you see something moving through the sky. It's a satellite. Now, I'm not saying it's spying on me, but with the infrared techniques and so on. So I wasn't really alone. And I mean, you know, people have to, on either a dramatic, personal discovery basis or not, realize, you know, that this will happen.
The high-tech equipment has certainly advanced tremendously over the years. You're right by saying, is it possible to be able to monitor a person's license plate? The technology is certainly there. And we can even downsize a little bit further. We could probably read the headlines of a newspaper. All a person has to do is watch a movie called Patriot Games, and you can see what type of imagery they used. Thermal imagery they used by identifying an individual. Many times we can use infrared technology because this is a heat-seeking type of equipment. Anything that has been hot, such as a car engine, can be picked up.
One thing which is on the horizon is something that is called intelligent transportation systems. This is a proposal which is currently being developed and will be in place in the near future that will monitor your movements on the highway. Cars will be equipped with a computer device. Tolls, bridges, there will be mechanisms along the highway to track your movements. They will record your license number. They will make sure that your registration is up to date. They will make sure that you are not wanted for any tickets that you might owe. So that all of this will be monitored electronically, and they can monitor your activities.
Canadians should be aware that CSE has this database and it contains personal information of Canadians and is held indefinitely. And they should be aware every time they use their phone, be it a cell phone or even what we call landline phones, or a portable, a walkabout phone, every time they use their ATM for a banking transaction, anytime they do anything that is going to be transmitted over the airways, it's there for people to pick up, listen to, and do with whatever they want.
Often when we look at new technologies, we think, wow, this is so new, we have no context to deal with these issues. And yet in the 20s, companies had a common practice that they would raid their employees' homes to make sure their employees weren't stealing from them. And people said, give me a break. That is an invasion of my personal space. That is outside your appropriate role as a business person. And the law eventually caught up and said, no, you can't do that. And I think to a large extent, that's what we're seeing now. That just because we can do something, because technology enables us to do all sorts of things, doesn't mean we should.
We are living in a society now in which surveillance in a score of different forms is becoming a routine of our lives. We cannot get up, leave our homes, and go to our work anymore without being stared at, spied upon, tracked, recorded, monitored, you name it, in 30 or 40 different ways almost every day.
I mean, there's people who make a living out of invading people's privacy, and some of them are called corporate executives, some of them are called deputy ministers of human resources or what have you. That's their job.
So you and I and all the rest of us are going naked before the world, believe me.
Wow, I thought it was bad in here. It seems to me the good old Big Brother's everywhere now.
Yeah, and what the world doesn't know is that all this stuff is paving the way perfectly for the rise of the Antichrist. When you try to tell people about the Bible and its warnings for the world, they either laugh it off or lock you up. Even the number of the beast is no big deal to most people now.
I was just reading about that. Called us all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in the right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. 666. They're using that now? Today?
It's become a bigger part of our everyday lives than most people realize. But once again, you try and tell them about it, they just laugh it off as superstition, or they hate you for just bringing it up. I find it extremely interesting that the UPC barcode, as designed in 1973, was coincidentally designed around the number 666.
Universal Product Codes, or UPCs, are found on almost every store product today. These codes allow the cashier to scan the item into the computer instead of entering the price manually. Every UPC is made up of numbers and bars. The bars themselves also have a numerical value. Notice that the bars on the left, in the middle, and on the right of the code do not have numerical values underneath them. However, the other bars all do. So by comparing these three bars at the beginning, the middle, and the end with numbered bars, it is clear that those dividing bars always represent the number 6.
Even though it's not apparent visibly to anyone who looks at it, there is a mathematical representation there of the number 666.
The book of Revelation tells us that in the last days, no one will be able to buy or to sell without the number 666, despite the protests of industry insiders who claim that it is all just a coincidence. The fact is that virtually every product sold in the world today is sold with the number 666 built into it.
This is incredible. Even your regular newspapers would be all over this, even if they didn't believe in the Bible. This is pretty interesting.
That's what you'd think, but it's still been ignored right from the beginning. Those reporters that did talk about it just tended to make fun of it as if Bible prophecy were some sort of old wives' tale.
Boy, I never really thought of it, but maybe it's not so bad in here after all. Looks like I wouldn't get much more freedom out there. At least I wouldn't have this darn tracking device showing everywhere I went.
Oh, don't be so sure about that. The last few years, the technology for implantable microchips has gone through the roof. They just seem to make so much sense that nobody stopped to consider the implications.
Farmers are now using radio frequency ID chip implants rather than brands or tattoos. And many insurance companies now are requiring animal owners to identify their pets with chip implants, and farm herds must be identified with chip implants, or livestock insurance cannot be obtained. So I think it's clearly evident that the technology of preference today is radio frequency ID chip implants.
Of course, the burning...
Dear CEO, go all electric. My skin, my way.
Of course, the burning question is, what about implants in people? Barbara Masson, the Director of Operations for Electronic Identification Devices, says there would be no technical problem in implanting the chips in humans. The Washington Times describes the process further. According to promotional literature, it is an ingenious, safe, inexpensive, foolproof, and permanent method of identification using radio waves. A tiny microchip the size of a grain of rice is simply placed under the skin. It is so designed as to be injected simultaneously with a vaccination or alone. And MasterCard's new commercials featuring the voice of Star Trek Jean-Luc Picard is already promoting a mark to a global audience.
374-90042.
Account code.
963-400.
Code. Since the last thing you need is one more number to remember, MasterCard is developing the single-digit PIN code. Someday, a computer chip in your card will recognize your unique mark, so your personal identification code is personal. It's how the future will be paid for. MasterCard. It's smart money.
The secular news media seems enthralled or extremely enthusiastic about the concept of identifying human beings with chip implants. Recently, we've seen newspaper articles in the Chicago Tribune, the Marin Independent Journal in San Francisco, Popular Science Magazine, the Tucson Citizen newspaper in Arizona, and various other publications that suggest the eventual use of chip implants in people's bodies to replace ID cards, debit cards, and various other forms of identification, including passports.
Most times, people who invent technology are imbued with the notion that because a piece of technology can do something, it is the thing that must be done. That is the wrong question. The question is always got to be, is it the right thing to do?
People now who have implants in them, that traces their movements, that helps their health needs, but it's also an invasion of privacy. Soon there's computers that are apparently being developed that can read your brainwaves, that can read your thoughts. I mean, these aren't toys or beyond the realm. People have to grapple with whether they want that Big Brother screen, which will be there.
It's just phenomenal, the amount of information that's out there in the secular media that would lend us to believe that chip implants are going to be used to identify us. And the concept of chipping people in their hands is what's astounding to me, since the Lord says specifically that the mark of the beast will go in the right hand or forehead, and no one will buy or sell without it.
So I've taken the mark of the beast without even knowing it. What's going to happen to me? Am I going to hell?
Oh, of course not. Relax. The technology itself isn't evil, any more than credit cards or that water bottle over there. The decision to follow Satan and take his mark are spiritual decisions. You can't be tricked into it. It's like I said before, it's a matter of allegiance. And those people who decide to take the mark of the beast will do so because they want to. They'll consciously and deliberately turn their backs on God. Choose you this day whom you will serve. And a decision to follow God will save you from all this. It's a decision that every person has to make for themselves. All you have to do is just decide if you believe that Jesus died for your sins.
want to be saved. I believe that Jesus died for me. Please tell me what to do.
You've already done it, my friend. Welcome to the kingdom of God.
Where's Dylan? Where's Dylan? This is impossible. Where can they be? You, search the grounds and bring me his son. Where's his son? I told you to bring me his son.
I'm afraid the boy's gone too, sir. I mean, his cell is still locked, but we can't find him anywhere.
This is impossible. How can that be? They've got to be somewhere. Find them and kill them. Did you hear me? Find them and kill them all. They've got to be somewhere.
Oh, friends, my heart has really been moved as I've been watching this dramatization with you, and I'm sure that you've been reminded that you have been actually reading about this in your newspapers and in your magazines, all about the breakthrough in computering and satellite tracking and bioengineering and communications, global communications, and so many, many other things, the smart cards. Now, we are living in a brave new world. There's a dark side to that. But there's also a wonderful light side to that, and that is the coming of the Lord. And Jack, I'd really like to ask you, how soon do you think the coming of the Lord is in the light of all we've seen?
Rexella, Jesus said, when you shall see all these things, not just one, but all of them happening simultaneously, then you know that my coming is near, even at the door. Matthew 24:33. And because it's so near, we have to warn people. Ezekiel 3:17 states, Son of man, I've made you a watchman. Therefore hear the word at my mouth and give them warning from me. Isaiah 58:1, cry aloud, spare not, lift up your voice like a trumpet, and show my people, warn my people about their transgressions. 1 Thessalonians 5:14 tells us to warn the unruly or the careless, and we are to warn all men. Colossians 1:18. Why? Because the time is at hand. Revelation 22:10.
Well, you know, one thing that Jack has warned us about so very, very often is the New World Order. Listen to this, friends. I found this so interesting. In 1960, there were virtually no courses being taught along the lines of a New World Order in our universities. Today, there are between 500 and 1,000 colleges and universities teaching the new international order, all sponsored by the Rockefeller Foundation. All this planning does not come from the lips of impotent, powerless utopians. Instead, the perpetrators of the world order are moving ahead by planning a new economic plan.
Sponsored by Rockefeller.
Yes.
That's important. Listen to this.
I'm going to quote him right now. Rockefeller stated that there is too little time left to get the plan accomplished gradually because the fundamentalists are waking up. And then, of course, he's talking about all the evangelical Christians there. I'm also going to quote from Richard A. Falk of the World Federation Association, and this is what he had to say. It's evident that the New World Order, as conceived in Washington, is about control and surveillance. A leading member of the Council on Foreign Relations, James P. Warburg, told the United States Senate's Foreign Relations Committee, On February 7th, way back in 1950, we shall have world government, whether we like it or not, by consent or by conquest. Friends, that is powerful. Jack, will it be by consent or by conquest?
I'll get into that in a moment, but first of all, let me give a little background material here. In Daniel chapter 2, verses 1 to 49, Nebuchadnezzar the king has a dream, and the prophet Daniel interprets it for him under the guidance of the Holy Spirit. And Daniel describes 5 world empires, and the final one of history being represented by 10 toes, Daniel 2:41. In Daniel chapter 7, verses 4 to 8, the prophet himself has a vision of the future and sees these same empires depicted by these beasts, and the final government is a composite beast with 10 horns. Now, the 10 horns are mentioned in Daniel chapter 7, verses 7, 20, and 24. But I don't know what 10 horns means. Well, the Bible interprets the Bible. Daniel 7:24. The 10 horns are 10 kings that shall arise. When? For the end time. Now, who are the 10? It started in 1948 with Benelux, when Belgium, the Netherlands, which is Holland, and Luxembourg began the movement. And then, of course, in 1957, we had Germany and Italy and France join it for a total of 6, ratified by the Treaty of Rome, for this is the revived Roman Empire. Then, of course, in 1973, England, Ireland, Denmark came on board for a total of 9, and then on January the 1st, 1981, Greece became a member for a total of 10 toes, Daniel 2:41, 10 horns, Daniel 7:7. And this would be the organization, the final world government that would create this system of keeping track of every person through technology, a numbering system, which I believe is here, as you've seen already on this dramatization. But will it be by consent or conquest, according to what Warburg asked or stated? There'll be some who love the idea and will consent to it, for they will have one mind on this matter, Revelation 17:13. Others will reject it and die for their stand, Revelation 13:15. And Revelation 20 verse 4 says, I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, and because they would not receive the mark. Some by consent, some by conquest. Many will refuse.
You know, friends, I have a very good question. Are you already a number instead of a person? This is out of Newsweek magazine by Jane Bryan-Quinn. They've got your number. You may have squawked that the world is treating you more like a number than a person, and you don't know the half of it. You are a number. Both you and I are branded by our credit score. David Nuthmode had this to say about it. If you are truly surprised that our privacy could be threatened by a website on the internet, then you definitely do not understand what we are getting ourselves into. We do not understand that every move we make is potentially traceable. And then listen to this, friends. Motorola plans a 12.9 billion satellite network. Why? Because they want to provide telecommunications services anywhere in the world. Well, Big Brother Goes High Tech by David Banissar, and this is what he has to say. Presently, information on almost every person in the developed world is computerized in several hundred databases. Why? They're collected, analyzed, and disseminated by governments and corporations. Friends, according to what I just read, wouldn't you say that we've lost our privacy?
You know, the Bible is right up to date. And do you know that many of the 20th century expressions come right from this book? For instance, do you ever hear anyone say, a little birdie told me? Well, that's Ecclesiastes 10:20. 20. A bird of the air shall carry the voice, and that which has wings shall tell the matter. Oh, for the good days we're going to be crying out very, very soon when they have information on everyone. And it's coming. Now, in Revelation 17:10, we discussed this a moment ago in the book of Daniel, the Old Testament, but now we want to see what the New Agreement Testament has to say about it. We find that there are only going to be 7 world governments. Listen carefully now to Revelation 17:10.